CIA used psychic to locate Ark of the Covenant? Unclassified documents claim. Did CIA psychics find the Ark of the Covenant in the Arab world? To be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, when I read stuff like that from Fox, I'm not even all that surprised. I'm just glad they tagged it in unusual, because it really is. Now, this is the story, the Russian sleep experiment, and you might be wondering, why are you bringing up a creepypasta from back in the day? This is one of the first 10 episodes of, I think it was Haunted Gaming creepypastas. I believe the title was actually the same. It was Haunted Gaming at the time. But point is, the Russian sleep experiment was one of those spooky internet stories that kind of really felt real, From my understanding, all right, this doesn't really have a established author, but they created an absolute banger of a story that involved Russian soldiers, Soviet soldiers back in the time, keeping people awake to massive lengths to the point that they would just go insane, all right? Literally insane, all right? This is one of the attributed medias. You've probably seen this in a few screamers yourself. But this is where, the beauty of the story, rather, is this is something you can kind of expect from the KGB, the CIA, any intelligence agency back in the day. Now, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States is one of the spookier, I want to say paramilitary intelligence organizations. Anything that is probably really messed up that has happened in the last several decades has probably had some involvement by the CIA. That's not a shock. They've got billions of dollars to operate around the world doing multiple black operations, and with all of that money present, sometimes the CIA discovers new ways to do intelligence gathering, and one of those ways is remote viewing. Now, to give you guys a context sake for the viewers watching, I feel the best way to describe this is through a game known as PsyOps: The Mindgate Conspiracy. Now, back in the PlayStation 2 Xbox, this was a banger game. It wasn't really huge. It's not like a AAA title, but the general premise is you play as a soldier that has mind abilities, so you can do telekinesis. One of them was remote viewing, okay? The best way to describe it is wall hacks. You can use your brain to look through walls, doors, anything to see what comes ahead. You can put your mind in other locations. You can remote view things. So you can understand, for the CIA, if they could crack the code, bro, you could remote view the inside of a drug cartel's compound. You could remote view the inside of another government. You can do some crazy shit. Now, was it actually valid? Probably not. Now, the reason why this is a top story at the moment and not a joke is that there's a declassified document that actually talks about this. So I wanted to see this document just to confirm it for myself and see what was the big hubbubaloo. So thankfully, to the CIA.gov reading room documents, we can view this. But before we check it out, let me remind you of our final merch drop, ladies and gentlemen. It's a few days left, so if you go to someordinarygamers.store, we got a brilliant hoodie, a coffee mug. You can even get both if you want, that are currently on sale. The last few days actually available. So if you want to go and support the channel, check out some new merch. There's some really, really cool stuff. The hoodie, in my opinion, is premium proper quality. I love wearing it. It's got my Linux commands that I look at every time. Not really. I mean, I have these things burned into my brain at this point. But it's glow in the dark. It's cute, and I highly recommend it. It's a great way, again, to support the channel. There's a lot of stuff that we do sometimes that YouTube doesn't take too kindly to, whether it be demonetized or sometimes age restricted, and a lot of that stuff really helps subsidize the channel. So again, if you want to support the channel, if you want to help out, or you want a cool piece of merch for the channel, then check out someordinarygamers.store. It's the last couple days, so I'm just putting it in here. Anyways, that said, ladies and gentlemen, approved for release 2008-08. Okay, so it was approved for release way too long ago. But if you look at it, it's Project Sunstreak. Warning notice, intelligence sources and methods involved. Okay, so here you got the project number TNG0209, date of session 5th December 1988. Okay, so it started at 9:15 a.m., ends at 10:45. Okay, so roughly around an hour to 2 hours. Date of the report, blah, blah, blah. Methodology, and then they mentioned CRY, stage 4 TNG, and then viewer identifier 032. So what they have here is the mission is to access and describe the target identified by coordinate 781-410/1110-121. So according to the session summary right over here, if I can zoom in a little bit, target is a container. This container has another container inside of it. The target is fashioned of wood, gold, and silver. The target is similar in shape to AOL, a coffin, and is decorated with seraphim. So this target is located somewhere in the Middle East, as the language spoken by individuals present seemed to be Arabic. Visuals of surrounding buildings indicated the presence of mosque domes. And then, of course, they've got actual drawings, which we're going to be looking at towards the tail end of this document. Individuals in the area were clothed in virtually all white, had black hair, and dark eyes. One figure I homed in on wore a mustache. So, again, this is somebody's remote viewing, okay? They're able to, like, apparently put their... I guess the best way is, like, maybe astrally project somewhere and, like, see things. So, this is a whole report written, again, by the Central Intelligence Agency, one of the most premier intelligence agencies in the world. The target is hidden, underground, dark, and wet, where all aspects of the location of the target. The purpose of the target is to bring a people together. It has something to do with ceremony, memory, homage, the resurrection. There is an aspect of spirituality, information, lessons, and historical knowledge far beyond what we know now. So again, the Ark of the Covenant, something obviously important in religious circles. The target is protected by entities and can only be opened by those who are authorized to do so. This container cannot be opened until the time is deemed correct. I've seen Indiana Jones, all right? Very recently. I know what happens when you break the rules there. Once it is time to open the container, the mechanics of the lock system will be found to be fairly simple. So again, to go down into it, you might be like, well, they've got drawings, Muda. Let's look at what these drawings can be. So again, the further you go down over here, you see like some random scratch notes like moist, cold, dank. So again, describing the general like remote viewing experience. You've got what appears to be an arched doorway, I would have to say. This appears to be one of the walls, a brick indeed. So not exactly, you know, the best sketches imaginable, but you get the idea. Oh, look at that. You got a little tank action going on. I don't know, we had tanks around here. That's crazy. So the moss domes they were talking about, this would be it. It looks actually more like a candle, but again, not exactly the craziest drawings right over here. So these are just notes that are being written, right, about the scenario. So right over here, I watched by who? Alone? I watched by... My God, these people type like, these people write like doctors, bro. But that appears to be like mummies, according to them. So mummies lining up the wall right here. So here is one of the logos, Seraphim. How is it opened? This is one of the apparent like lock mechanisms right over here. Or at least like a better representation of what they're looking at. But what's important here is who was protecting the Ark of the Covenant. Well, according to the last portion of this remote viewing note, individuals opening the container by prying or striking are destroyed by the container's protectors through the use of a power unknown to us, laser beams. I think that's what it is. So again, when you're looking around, they don't have a drawing of them, but they actually mention it right over here. Forbidden, protected, like an actual paranormal entity protecting this stuff. Now you might be like, whoa, Muda, I cannot believe this came out of the Central Intelligence Agency. And boy, do I have something to tell you about the fucking CIA. Now, to give you an idea, this is something known as, I want to say, remote viewing. Obviously, we know that, but this isn't the first time remote viewing was ever really brought into the mix of the CIA. So, for instance, for anybody that doesn't know, this has been going on since like the early 70s. So back in the 70s, you had things like Scanit, you had Gondola Wish, you had Grill Flame, you had Center Lane, you had obviously what we're looking at Sunstreak in the 80s, and then the latest iteration was Stargate, where eventually after this in 1995, they shut down the entire remote viewing project. So basically the idea for this was the CIA, and I guess the greater intelligence community thought that there was some value to the process of remote viewing, that it could be trained for certain operatives, it could be tested, and then it could eventually be brought into utilization for national security reasons. So when you're playing Metal Gear Solid 1 and you see fucking Psycho Mantis, there was a time when the CIA was thinking of training their own Psycho Mantises. Obviously, they weren't probably levitating, but they were really, really banking in on like psychological activities. And there was a lot of experimentation back in the day between the Americans and the Soviets and really any country with an intelligence program. Because if you even caught wind, for instance, that the Soviets were fucking around with psychics, you also had the budget to fuck around with psychics. It was a race in every direction. So whether you're talking about the arms race, the space race, this would basically just be the psychic race. I mean, one would say the only reason Stargate ever existed was because back in the day, the KGB or the GRU, really military factions of the Soviets, were fucking around with telepathy, clairvoyance, and mind control weapons at the time. I shit you not. So obviously, the US government was like, hey, if they're putting in money for this, there's probably a good reason we should as well. So realistically, this is why this went on for decades at the time. Now, does that mean that this was entirely a complete failure? Actually, no. The more I researched this, the more I found out that there were actually some surprising successes in all this. For instance, back in the day, there was a Soviet submarine location. We're talking about a Soviet Typhoon-class sub that no satellite imagery had actually ever captured. And so one viewer at the time, Joe McMonagle, actually had used their remote viewing senses and described it as, quote-unquote, a giant sub that was bigger than anything that the US government pretty much has seen at the time. So he started to give dimensions of this, he started to actually get really close, like really specific. And turns out when satellite imagery came in to verify the remote claim, they actually completely matched, from what I understand, his description. So any analyst in this entire pool that was looking at this program was like, maybe there is some weight to it, okay? Maybe there is something. I mean, wouldn't you at the time? So of course, beyond all of this, things like the Iran hostage crisis, which this actually blew my mind, right? They actually had remote viewers trying to locate hostages. But again, some of the descriptions they had were pretty accurate. Some of them, on the other hand, were not. And the thing is, they couldn't act on this, they couldn't act on any of this, at the time, because it just took too long to corroborate this information, to make sure it was usable for actual operators on the ground. I mean, if you don't believe me, okay, there's actual secret documentation of this from the CIA reading room. Iranian remote viewing sessions. So again, they are describing, again, this Iranian hostage crisis. And again, this is before the days of like drones and a lot of, modern technology that could be used to assist in counter-terror efforts like this. This is like, again, maybe like a Hail Mary. I mean, you can read right over here. The viewer described a multi-story flat-roofed building that appeared to have some sort of cafeteria inside. The viewer felt that there were 6 hostages at this location, 4 of which are newcomers of being held here temporarily. With Joseph Hall, the viewer described a U.S. Army staff sergeant. The remote viewer said that he perceived 3 heavily armed guards in the large room, and another at the entrance of this building. During the debriefing, the viewer stated that he felt the hostages were being categorized and grouped at the time. So it was just multiple remote viewers that were there to assist. And again, some of this stuff was kind of eerily accurate, but it couldn't be used in time. Now look, again, the Ark of the Covenant and the CIA's interest is kind of still wild because, again, it's the CIA trying to look for a religious artifact, which, again, if they can find it, is super mind-blowing in the religious community, okay? Just in in any community. I mean, it kind of just, in a way, proves one religion over the other, which is still something many theists are trying to do. So again, according to like the New York Post and John McGonigal, who was actually one of the first remote viewers, somebody we just looked at, he said, again, in this case, it is a training target done on a whim. He said, adding, I would challenge the entire practice session as bogus. No one attempted to ascertain the ground truth of the material, and everything said was accepted on its unknown and unverifiable merit, which is true, right? Like if somebody is like, hey, I've got coordinates for the Ark of the Covenant, you could, and you should, and you definitely have the budget to send some operators on the ground to confirm if what you're seeing, this crazy discovery, is actually real. And the fact that I don't think the CIA did probably is like a great sign of even they didn't really believe it at the time. Now, there's a lot of religious organizations that are interested in the CIA and their discoveries and possible research into this stuff. So there's people who file things like FOIA requests, which is Freedom of Information requests, that you can do to any government agency in the United States, and generally they'll respond to you and give you the information just because it's a level of transparency the government has with its people, which is great. So obviously back in like 1999, there was a scenario where like apparently the Ark of the Covenant became huge news, or at least sensational news in tabloid journalists, right? So the CIA was asked in an FOIA request if they actually had, again, the Ark of the Covenant files. So here it is, like from 2002's case log, the possibility of the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia. So yeah, it's just, again, asking for information, asking for files. And obviously, the CIA didn't really have anything for them. The CIA even responded. Catholics Allied for the Faith Inc. submitted a request for records pertaining to the possibility of the Ark of the Covenant being located in Ethiopia. And the CIA is like, yeah, we got the request, we committed a search, and there was no responsive records located. Which, again, wouldn't really be a shock. The CIA looked through their drawers and they were like, yeah, we can't find shit. There it is. Later on in 2012, right, the Central Intelligence Agency gets written to, gets a academic FOIA request, and the CIA literally, again, has to say that they don't have documents on this. So, dear Dr. Rothmiller, this acknowledged receipt of your letter addressed to Mr. Mike Morrell, acting director of the CIA, basically will say any documentation relating to the Ark of the Covenant, the item commonly known as the Holy Grail, and the body of or the man known as Jesus Christ. So here they write, we have thoroughly reviewed your FOIA request and determined the following regarding the answers of your questions. We searched our previously released records database on the exact terms you provided. The Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, the body of Christ, and the man known as Jesus Christ, and no documents were located. A copy of each requester's report is being provided to you. Regarding the imagery of Mount Ararat area in Turkey, the image belongs to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. The CIA is not the repository for records of other government agencies. The information you seek would fall under the auspices of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. So, yeah, it's interesting. All right? Like, basically, from what I'm gathering over here is we've looked through our public declassified things, can't find anything on what you want. In fact, go ask elsewhere. So some people could even interpret this and think, maybe they're still kind of hiding information. But I'd probably wager that the CIA really doesn't have this information. Because I feel like if the CIA did have this, I'm pretty sure there's other intelligence agencies as impressive as the CIA that probably would have also seen this. And probably, this would have come out a long time ago, if it was actually realistic. And anything else regarding the Ark of the Covenant in the CIA typically involved with them just observing it from like the importance it has for Muslims and Jews and Christians in terms of, again, how important this artifact is for people of the Abrahamic faith. So yeah, clearly it's important, and the CIA observes pretty much everything. So this is obviously nothing super duper shocking. That's pretty much where things kind of die out here. Now look, at the end of all this, remote viewing pretty much fizzled out because, again, all of this was too inconsistent for the CIA to really rely on. Where there were some accuracies, there's also a lot of claims where maybe those accurate results were maybe cherry-picked by a lot of the actual analysts that just wanted the experiment to work. So maybe the results actually ended up getting skewed out. Look, this was a serious project the CIA took very seriously back in the day, but they had to turn it out in 1995, and there's a whole AIR report about this where they specifically say no remote viewing report ever provided actionable information that was independently verified. And that's pretty much the long and short TLDR of it, ladies and gentlemen. The Ark of the Covenant has not been located by the Central Intelligence Agency. And the remote viewing pretty much was nothing massive. So a lot of these sites that kind of talk about this stuff and bring it up, I'm not here to, again, poo on anyone's parade. That's not the point. I actually found this to be pretty interesting, and it gave me another reason to look into one of the CIA's most interesting projects. And the thing about the CIA is, this isn't the only thing. We could have like an entire year's worth of content if we just talked about Project MKUltra, which we might as well. We might as well deep dive into the deepest secrets of the CIA and what it's done to people. It's kind of what I even started my channel on too, even with covering some creepypastas. So I think going back to that is not only a great return to form, but it's also really interesting. It's fun to dig through the files of one of the most secretive intelligence agencies in the world and talk about goofy stuff like this, but it's also worth talking about some of the really scary stuff that they've also done too. And thankfully I've invested in some bulletproof glass, so I don't have to really worry about no snipers, ladies and gentlemen. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.